I found a keyboard which is super premium, looks clean, has a creamy sound, and is only $50. But because it's so cheap, I think it could be a great one for customization, which we'll get to later. But let's take a look at the design, function, and performance so we can see whether it's genuinely worth your time or not. As soon as you grab this mystery keyboard, you can immediately feel the weight. I usually like the solid, sturdy metal ones, even though plastic ones can give you that desirable thocky sound. The packaging is nice, and in the box you get 2 spare key switches, a USB cable, some gray accents for added customization, a keycap and switch puller tool. This already looks good. Cool. And of course, the keyboard, which is the YUNZII AL75. And just for reference, this video is not sponsored. Now, you can get 2 types of switches for this keyboard. You can get a blue-gray tactile switch, or you can get a Cocoa Cream V2 linear, which is the one that I got. And if someone feels more low profile for a non-low profile mechanical keyboard, I don't feel like I need a wrist rest or anything like that. I can just use it straight on the table as is. There's some rubber feet to keep it stable. The finish is quite nice. It is a little bit fingerprint prone, but once the keyboard's actually on my desk, I'm not really going to be touching it all that much, other than the keycaps themselves. The keycaps are cherry profile and are a double shot PBT. The characters are clean and consistent across the board. And my only issue with the keyboard is the thickness of the sides. I normally like a uniform border around all the keycaps, but I understand why they've done this. They've just tried to get a uniform sizing. Like when I put my wrist rest up to this, it matches perfectly. And if it didn't, that could also be an issue for some people too. I also heard on some reviews that the LED lights on this thing were a little bit dim, but in my opinion, they are more than fine. I don't really like to use LED lights, and I usually keep them turned off. If you do want a more muted look, you can swap to the gray accent keycaps. And I also like this little RGB accent, which I didn't think I'd like. I wish I could customize it so it matches my aesthetic a little bit more. The USB port for the cable is in the middle of the keyboard, which I much prefer. I know with some of my previous keyboards, they are on the side, and depending on the layout of your room or your desk, it can be annoying because it's actually on the other side of where it needs to be. And I'm also not the biggest fan of this little gold plate with this engraving over the USB. I do wish it was a different color and maybe even a different design, but that is a small gripe, and I may even 3D print something for it in the future. The actual construction of the keyboard is quite nice. It helps with its audio performance just because there's so many layers of dampening, and it also helps a little bit with how rigid the keyboard is. Now, in terms of the functionality of this keyboard, I did run into a few issues. The first issue was with that Bluetooth receiver. Now, on the back of the keyboard, there is this little switch that swaps from Bluetooth to wired connection to wireless connection. When I did switch it to Bluetooth, the USB receiver did not pick that up, but when I switched it over to wireless, it did. So I'm not sure if my connections are swapped over, but that wasn't so much the issue. I was having a lot of input issues. So it wasn't picking up my commands. There was a bit of lag. I don't know what was going on exactly. Now, I did manage to fix this by plugging in a cable, using it for a bit, and then going back to the Bluetooth, and then it did work. So I'm not quite sure what was happening in that initial phase. I also flat out couldn't get the YUNZII desktop app to work, so I couldn't actually program the keys to have my own custom commands, which I am used to. So if someone does know how to fix that, please help me out. However, the pre-programmed controls do work perfectly fine, and you can even control your RGB settings through there. And my last little gripe is some of the keycaps can be difficult to remove on some parts of the board, like the escape or delete key. I mean, it is aluminum case, so there's no flex, and the tolerances are quite tight, so it is a bit difficult to remove. Now, let's move on to the reason you are all here. What's the performance like of this keyboard? Firstly, does it actually feel good? This is all subjective, and my personal experience, what I like, you may absolutely hate. So I'm used to silent linear switches. So just trying out a linear switch that isn't silenced is a cool change. Overall, it's a buttery and crispy experience. I really enjoy typing on this keyboard. I'm not sure how to explain it, but they have this nice pronounced edge when I'm typing. Unlike my silent linears on my other keyboard, which almost have this pillowy feel. And for reference, I love that soft pillowy feel. I just think this is different. It's more snappier. It could be the spring tension or the travel distance. There is also a little bit of pre-travel on the switches when you start pressing it just before it actually registers the input. I do think if that was a tad bit smaller, it would be perfect, but overall they feel good and sturdy. Now let's take a look at the audio performance. So let's do a sound test of the keyboard, and just for reference, my keyboard is sitting just on my desk. There's no desk mat or anything that could dampen the sound further. Usually when you do have something underneath your keyboard, it can sound a lot better. But I did want to just see the raw performance of this keyboard and overall give you a feeling of what to expect. Now, just after that sound test, when I compare it to my previous keyboard, even though it's completely different, I can definitely tell this is a premium build because I actually really like that sound. They sound very crispy. They almost have this like slightly creamy melody with the subtle thockiness on the outer edges. And the spacebar just pops in periodically with this really distinct actuation. I'm not sure if I describe this keyboard as more creamy or marbly. When it comes to the pitch, it is on the higher end when compared to some other key switches. And I'm not gonna lie, they are a lot louder than I'm used to, and this definitely could annoy your colleagues or people that are in your general vicinity. Switches also come pre-lubed, and you can tell the stabilizers have zero rattle. I also showed a few people who came over to my house the keyboard, and they really liked the sound and even wanted to get one themselves. It's also important to note that my microphone tends to amplify anything it's recording. So some of the sounds that you may hear on this video, you don't necessarily hear them when you're typing on this keyboard at your desk. So you'll genuinely find that the keyboard has a more subtle, creamy sound in person. Now, this keyboard may not compare to some more premium models on the market. If you are someone that is a deep enthusiast like me and you've heard a lot of different types, you may not think this is the best sound, but I definitely do like the sound, and it's a nice change of pace to what I'm used to. So is it worth it? Normally this keyboard's like $140 or $110 on sale, but I actually got this keyboard through one of the suppliers on Temu, and they were offering it through the app for like $50, which is absurd value. Again, just to remind you, I am not sponsored for this keyboard. And even when I do compare it to a keyboard that I built a few years ago, I think keyboards stock from the factory have come such a long way from when I first got into it. Back when I got into it, it was very niche. Everything was so expensive, and the quality of most keyboards were not up to the standard that we have today. If you do decide to pick this up, you're getting a very premium keyboard construction with an aluminum frame. You're getting a great looking set of keycaps and finish, a buttery and crispy typing experience, and really creamy acoustics. The keyboard sound may not be to everybody's taste, especially for those who are deeper in the mechanical keyboard rabbit hole and know what expensive keyboards sound like. But for an entry-level keyboard, it sounds pretty damn good and would easily beat those priced higher. Overall, I do think the YUNZII AL75 is worth it. And even if you do pay the full price of $140, I still think it's an easy recommend. Now, another thing I wanted to try with this keyboard was customizing it. Normally you can spend a lot of money to get a premium mechanical keyboard frame, stabilizers, PCB plate, and the inner layers of the keyboard. But here you can get this all for $50, right? Which makes me wonder what this keyboard would sound like with some new switches, keycaps, and even some modifications to it. I think we could definitely use the YUNZII here to make a really premium mechanical keyboard at a much lower price. So I'm gonna work on getting a video like that out soon, but if you wanna pick one up in the meantime, I'll leave links down below. Peace.